Okay, so this is section 2.8. It's going to give you a function f of x, it's going to give you a function g of x, and it's going to say determine the domain of f minus g of x. First of all, the domain of the sum, the difference, and the product will all be the same. So once you find it for one of these, then it's going to be the same for the difference and the product. But it will be different for the quotient. So you'll see that here in a little bit. So determine the domain of f minus g of x. First of all, h of x is equal to f of x minus g of x. So what you need to do is it's going to be the intersection of the domain. So find the domain of f of x. So domain of f of x is just negative infinity to infinity because it's a quadratic. And then this is just linear for the g of x. So this one is not too difficult. The intersection of those two domains is negative infinity to infinity. So the domain of h of x is negative infinity to infinity. Now say the domain of this was negative infinity to infinity and this was 0 to infinity, then their intersection would be from 0 to infinity. You'll see an example like that here shortly. All right, so now it says find h of 2 using the definition. So what that means is it wants you to find h of 2, and we know h of x is equal to f of x minus g of x. So you'll have to find f of 2, and then you'll have to find g of 2, and then subtract the 2. All right, so if you plug in 2 into the f function, I'm plugging into the f function here, it's 2 times 2 squared minus 3 times 2. That's going to be 4 times 2 is 8, minus 6 gives me 2 for this one. Minus, then I'm going to have to plug in 2 into the g function, which looks like this, 7 times 2 minus 2. And then that's going to be 14 minus 2, which is 12. So then it gives us 2 from the f of 2 minus 12 from the g of 2. So my final answer is negative 10. Now, if they say find the new function h of x, all that wants you to do is take the right side of f of x and subtract the right side of g of x. But this one has to go inside parentheses. So you got to remember to distribute your negative. So h of x is equal to 2x squared minus 3x minus the quantity 7x minus 2. Distribute your negative through and then just add like terms. That gives me 2x squared minus 10x plus 2. Okay, now it says find h of 2 using the new function rule that you found in number 3. So this is the combined two functions, the difference of the two functions. So if you also plug in 2 into that, we'll get the same answers we got up here, which was negative 10. So let's see. We are plugging in 2. So this is going to be 8 minus 20 plus 2. 8 minus 20 is negative 12 plus 2 gives me negative 10. And so it matches with the other one. Now, if we were going to do the sum of these two functions, so now the domain is going to be a little bit different. Let's find the domain. Well, the domain of f of x is a quadratic, so it's negative infinity to infinity. And the domain of g of x, okay, so this was in another chapter. What we do with square roots is we set the x plus 3 to be greater than or equal to 0 and solve. X is greater than or equal to negative 3. You can even graph that on a number line if it helps you. So here's negative 3. It's a solid point going to the right. So the domain of g of x is bracket negative 3 to infinity. Now what is the intersection of those two domains? That is the domain of the h of x function. So this is everything. This is only negative 3 to infinity. So the intersection, or the domain of h of x, is going to be bracket negative 3 to infinity. Okay, so now we need to find a new function rule for h of x. It says that h of x is equal to f plus g of x. So h of x is equal to f of x, you could write it like this, plus g of x. So take the right side of f of x, take the right side of g of x, and add them together. You can't do a whole lot with this to simplify, so we'll leave it just like this. So here's our new function rule, because we don't have any like terms or anything to make that more simple. So now let's evaluate this for h of 3. If you plug in 3 into our new function, it's going to be 3 times 3 squared plus square root of 3 plus 3. This would be 27 plus square root of 6. Square root of 6 doesn't simplify, so you could leave it just like that. Now we evaluate it for negative 5. Now something's going to happen here, because what is the domain of h of x? It's only from negative 3 to infinity. Notice where this negative 5 is. Okay, but we'll plug it in anyway. H of negative 5 is equal to, our new function is 3x squared plus square root of x plus 3. That's what our h of x is. So 3 times negative 5 squared plus square root of negative 5 plus 3. And if you look right here, I'm not even going to evaluate this, because what is this going to give you? It's going to give you a square root of negative 2, which is undefined. So we can stop right there, which we knew if we had looked at the domain that it's going to be undefined. So what is the difference between the domain from the difference function and the domain from the sum function? Well, the sum function on the previous page was that it was all reals. And then the domain of the difference was that it was closed negative 3 to infinity.